Welcome to Sleepy SpongeBob.
Begin with a soft, mysterious opening. The night the sea hummed like it had secrets only it could tell. He felt something strange stirring in his chest. Immediately establish emotional intimacy. We really do love and care about you. And before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now let's get started. Hint at the unusual yet calm journey ahead. A strange, gentle event is about to ripple outward, quietly shaping a life. The night the sea hummed with secrets, SpongeBob felt something flutter inside him he didn't yet understand. It was not excitement nor fear, but a kind of gentle stirring. A soft reminder that life was quietly alive even in the corners where no one paid attention. The jellyfish floated lazily above the reef, glowing like tiny lanterns in the dark water, and the waves carried whispers that seemed meant just for him. We really do love and care about you. Before we begin this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Now let's get started. SpongeBob's life had always been a little unusual, even in a place where unusual was ordinary. He was small and square, a creature of endless curiosity and boundless softness. He loved the world in a way that made it seem as though he had been born to notice the tiniest details, the way bubbles danced in sunlight, the way the sand shifted beneath a passing snail, the gentle sigh of a seaweed frond in the current. To most, these were simple things, things that could be ignored. But to him they were stories, hints of something larger, quietly unfolding. His home was a pineapple tucked into the coral, bright and oddly fragrant, a little haven of warmth and cheer. Each morning he would wake to the sun spilling across the ocean floor, scattering light through the rippling waves, and he would stretch his square arms wide, imagining he could hug the entire sea. There was a certain magic in his optimism, not loud or flashy but steady and true, like the low hum of the tide beneath the world. Even as a child, SpongeBob had a way of noticing hearts. He didn't always understand their words, but he understood their rhythm, their quiet pulls and sighs. There was Squidward, with his scowl that seemed carved into his face, whose clarinet notes often floated into SpongeBob's window late at night. SpongeBob could feel Squidward's loneliness, the way it curled around him like smoke, and he offered what little warmth he could, even if it was only a small smile or a quiet laugh shared across the hallway. Patrick, on the other hand, was a chaos of affection and gentle absurdity. There was something comforting in Patrick's uncomplicated presence, the way he could lie beneath the moonlight and hum without words, filling the quiet with soft, steady comfort. SpongeBob had learned early that friendship was less about constant talking and more about noticing the small signals, a twitch of an eye, a tilt of the head, the way silence could speak volumes when shared. It was in these small acts, unnoticed by the bustling sea around him, that SpongeBob first began to understand responsibility, not the kind that demanded orders and deadlines, but the kind that grew quietly, like a coral sprouting in the deep. One day he was asked to do something seemingly ordinary, deliver a pizza. The Krusty Krab had an order to send out, and it was his turn to carry it. Simple, they said. Just take it from here to there. But SpongeBob felt the weight of it in his chest as he held the warm box in his hands. It wasn't fear. It was something softer, a kind of reverent awareness. He understood, even if only dimly, that every step mattered, that every bubble, every current could shape the journey. He looked at the pizza, its steaming edges promising satisfaction and smiles, and for a moment he imagined it as a fragile gift for a stranger he would never see. And in that moment, the small miracle of caring and of giving something more than himself settled into him like a lullaby. He set off through the night. The streets of Bikini Bottom strangely quiet, the glow of distant houses like stars mirrored below the waves. Each street corner seemed to hold a story, a snail napping under a lamplight, a school of fish gliding silently across the sand, a forgotten toy drifting in the current. SpongeBob greeted them all softly, as though his voice might wake a dream or soothe a worry. He hummed quietly to himself, a tune he had learned from the soft ebb of the tide, and it made the world feel less vast, less lonely. The journey was not without its peculiarities. A drifting jellyfish brushed against his arm, leaving a trail of warmth. A loose current nudged him gently off course, and he laughed. the sound echoing in soft ripples across the water. He realized in those quiet moments that he had never known patience until the sea taught it to him. He could not rush what was delicate. He could not hurry what needed unfolding. And so he moved with care, letting the currents guide him as much as his own small hands. SpongeBob carried more than a pizza that night. He carried hope in its simplest form, the hope that someone's evening might be brighter because of a small kindness, the hope that the world, even in its vast, unknowable depths, could be a little warmer if noticed. The currents whispered their approval, the jellyfish nodded in slow arcs, and SpongeBob felt, for the first time that he remembered, the quiet thrill of being fully present, fully awake, fully alive. By the time he glimpsed the distant lights of the delivery point, the night had deepened into a soft, comforting black, stitched with silver threads of starlight filtering through the water. SpongeBob paused, taking a breath that seemed to carry the weight of the entire ocean, and he smiled. Not for himself, but for the small ripple of joy he would leave behind, for the quiet transformation that comes when someone gives a piece of themselves with gentle care. He did not yet know what the next moments would bring, nor the challenges or the wonders that lay ahead. But for now, in the stillness of the night, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. And somewhere in that quiet space, Patrick might be humming. Squidward might be playing a note that only he could hear, and the world, vast and strange, would hold him gently, as he held it back. And so SpongeBob continued on, carrying more than a pizza. He carried curiosity, softness, patience, and the fragile but enduring promise that every small act, every simple gesture, could leave a trace of warmth in the heart of the world. The night lingered on as SpongeBob drifted through the quiet streets, the warm weight of the pizza still cradled in his arms. The journey had begun as a simple task, but it had already turned into something far softer, far deeper. Each ripple of the water beneath his feet felt like a conversation with the world itself, as though the ocean had secrets it was willing to share only with those who moved carefully enough to notice. SpongeBob noticed, always. He remembered the first time he had felt the pull of the tides not just on his body, but on his heart. It had been long before he could even make a proper Krabby Patty, back when he would lie awake beneath the coral ceiling of his pineapple house, listening to the faint hum of currents brushing past the windows. The world had seemed impossibly large then, filled with shadows and half-understood whispers, but even in that enormity there was a kind of tender order. A tiny snail would glide by, and he would whisper a soft greeting, as if acknowledging the snail's small private life mattered. And it did. Patrick had been there too, though his guidance was often silent, a presence rather than words. Sometimes he would lie on the sand beside SpongeBob, staring up at the diffuse glow of the bioluminescent plankton, and hum, a lullaby of friendship, simple and unassuming, that reminded SpongeBob that no matter how strange or lonely the ocean could feel, connection existed in these quiet moments. He could almost hear Patrick's thought floating in the water. It's okay. We're here. We're together. And it was enough. SpongeBob's mind wandered to Squidward as well. Squidward, who rarely smiled, who often seemed lost in his own private grumbles, had taught SpongeBob an unexpected lesson about observation. There was a subtlety in noticing someone's pain or weariness without needing to fix it, in offering kindness without expectation. One night, SpongeBob had watched Squidward play his clarinet in the moonlit hallway, notes rising like fragile bubbles into the water. He hadn't understood the music fully, hadn't understood why it sometimes made him feel a little ache in his chest, but he understood the intention, the quiet dedication behind each sound, and sometimes that was enough. Now moving through the soft currents toward the distant glow of the delivery address, SpongeBob felt those lessons come together. Patience, empathy, attentiveness, these were not grand powers, not the kind sung about in heroic tales, but they were powers nonetheless, subtle and persistent, shaping every step he took. He hummed softly, a tune he had carried with him for years, and the ocean seemed to respond. A drifting jellyfish paused to float alongside him, its soft luminescence brushing against his square frame like a gentle wave of approval. The streets shifted as he moved, the once familiar corners taking on new shapes in the low, wavering light. Shadows bent and lengthened, and SpongeBob realized the journey was teaching him something more than delivery. It was teaching him attention, presence, and the quiet joy of small discoveries. A discarded bottle glided past, catching the glow of the moon and scattering tiny reflections across the sand. He bent to pick it up, setting it gently on the coral edge, imagining that someone somewhere might later see it and smile at its unexpected shimmer. He thought again of Patrick, imagining him humming somewhere nearby, and Squidward, perhaps practicing some forgotten melody in the stillness of night. And then he realized something. The journey was no longer about a pizza. It had never been. It was about connection, about noticing, about being awake to the small and subtle beauty in a world that often seemed indifferent. Every step, every bubble, every drifting current was a note in a quiet symphony. And SpongeBob, despite himself, felt honored to play along. The water deepened in hue, shifting from soft blue to a quiet indigo. And SpongeBob felt the gentle pressure of currents against his legs, nudging him off the familiar paths. For a moment, a flicker of unease touched him. The sea was vast and he was small, but he breathed in soft and measured, and remembered that the tides had always offered guidance when he moved with patience. The uncertainty became a gentle thrill, a reminder that life was as much about discovery as it was about destination. Along the way, he noticed a young fish struggling to navigate a small pile of driftwood. SpongeBob knelt beside him, whispering encouragement, his square hands offering a steadying presence. "It's okay," he said softly. "We'll get through it together." And slowly, carefully, they guided the little one through the obstacle. The fish's eyes glimmered with gratitude, a tiny light reflecting the warm currents of kindness SpongeBob carried in his heart. It was a small act, unnoticed by most, yet it left a quiet mark, a reminder that even the smallest gestures ripple outward, touching lives in ways the eye cannot always see. He continued, feeling the night shift as the currents grew colder, the shadows deeper, yet the quiet thrill of adventure kept him steady. The glow of the delivery destination appeared faintly in the distance, like a beacon suspended in water, offering not urgency, but gentle direction. He hummed a little louder, a melody rising in soft arcs, carrying with it the echoes of friendship, empathy, and the small joys that had shaped him. And in that moment, SpongeBob understood something he hadn't before. The journey itself was the reward. The pizza, warm in his hands, was simply a vessel for a deeper truth. Every step he took, every gentle act he performed, was part of a larger rhythm, a pattern of attention and care that bound him quietly to the world. There were no cheers, no grand declarations, but the satisfaction was profound. He had delivered more than a pizza. He had delivered patience, presence, and a small piece of himself into the night. By the time he reached the faint glow of the delivery address, the soft indigo of the water had deepened to a rich, comforting black. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting, just as he had done throughout the night. He set the pizza down gently, inhaling the soft scents of the crust, the warm steam curling like a lullaby in the cool water. And as he stepped back, feeling the gentle current brush against his legs, he smiled softly, understanding that this quiet act, small and unnoticed, was part of something larger, a mosaic of kindness, attention, and slow, deliberate love for a world that often forgot to notice itself. SpongeBob lingered for a moment, letting the soft weight of accomplishment settle in his chest. There was no applause, no dramatic flourish, just the steady pulse of the ocean, and the knowledge that he had been present, truly present, in a world that so often rushed past without care. He turned to leave, already feeling the tug of the currents guiding him back home. And in the quiet night, he hummed one last note for the small fish, for Patrick, for Squidward, and for the sea itself. It was a melody woven of gratitude and gentle reflection, a song for those who noticed, and for those who might one day notice them. And somewhere in that dark, comforting night, the jellyfish floated, the sea whispered, and SpongeBob felt the first hint of a deeper journey waiting to unfold, one that would carry him not just through streets and currents, but through the quiet architecture of hearts, including his own. The ocean was calm now, almost reverent, as SpongeBob made his way back through the streets of Bikini Bottom. The pizza had been delivered, the task complete, yet a quiet thought lingered in his mind. What made a journey meaningful? Not the distance, not the obstacles, not the completion itself, but the subtle moments that had filled the space between departure and arrival. Each small encounter, each whispered current, each soft brush of a jellyfish's glow had left a mark, invisible yet profound. He carried that understanding with him like a lantern in the dark, lighting the way not just through streets, but through the vast corridors of thought and feeling. As he passed familiar corners, SpongeBob noticed the way the moonlight scattered across the sand, pooling in gentle shapes that reminded him of childhood memories he had nearly forgotten. He remembered lying on his pineapple floor, staring up at the ceiling that mimicked the ocean currents above, imagining that the world was larger than any map could contain. Even then he had known that kindness mattered, that attention mattered, that small gestures could ripple further than anyone could measure. And now, walking quietly under the moon, he understood that each small act of care he had offered tonight had created a chain of soft illumination, like a row of tiny lanterns trailing behind him in the water. Patrick appeared suddenly, as though conjured by the gentle rhythm of the tide. He floated lazily alongside SpongeBob, humming the same lullaby he had been humming for years, and there was no need for words. Silence could speak so much more than speech, and SpongeBob felt that understanding in the hum of the currents, the gentle press of Patrick's presence. "Did you see them smile?" Patrick finally asked, his voice low and airy. SpongeBob nodded, a quiet glow filling his chest. He had not thought of it as anything grand, but it mattered. This recognition of joy and relief in others, a soft and quiet heroism that did not require fanfare. They moved together through a narrow passage where the water shimmered with bioluminescent plankton, the light flickering in sync with SpongeBob's heartbeat. It was in moments like this that he reflected most deeply on the nature of his own quirks, the way his optimism had carried him, the way his empathy shaped his actions, the way his laughter could ripple into the lives of others like gentle waves. What had once seemed like trivial innocence now felt like a subtle strength, quiet but unwavering, as if the world had designed him to notice, to care, and to bring light in places where it might otherwise be forgotten. As they moved past an abandoned coral archway, SpongeBob spotted a small snail tangled in a bed of drifting kelp. Without hesitation, he knelt beside it, his soft hands carefully disentangling the creature. Patrick watched, humming a soft note of encouragement, and SpongeBob marveled at the simplicity of the act. No one had asked him to stop. No one had noticed. Yet in this quiet moment, he felt the weight of responsibility and the satisfaction of doing exactly what was right. The snail twitched its antennae in gratitude, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that lit up SpongeBob's heart like a constellation in the vast night sky. It was in the calm aftermath of such acts that SpongeBob began to notice patterns, subtle lessons woven into the fabric of daily life. The world had a rhythm, and those who moved attentively could hear it, could participate in it, not in loud or dramatic ways, but in the gentle, almost imperceptible spaces between moments. He understood that the softest heroism often left no mark beyond the heart, that the most significant victories were invisible, experienced only by those who truly paid attention. Patrick finally spoke again, quieter this time, his voice blending seamlessly with the hum of the ocean. "You see, SpongeBob, it's not about the pizza. It's about the way you move through the world, the way you notice it, the way you carry care with you." SpongeBob smiled, understanding without needing further explanation. Each step, each gesture, each soft word had formed an invisible thread, connecting him to the currents, the creatures, and even to his own developing heart. It was a soft kind of magic, one that could be carried and shared without ever being named or noticed. SpongeBob continued down the familiar streets, now seeing them anew. A discarded toy lay half buried in the sand, and he picked it up, brushing it clean with gentle care. A faint shimmer of appreciation passed over him, like a tiny reminder that every attentive act held meaning, whether acknowledged or not. The currents shifted around them, playful yet deliberate, guiding SpongeBob and Patrick back toward home, while also teaching them something about timing, patience, and trust in the unseen flow of life. In the distance, Squidward's window glowed faintly, his clarinet notes echoing softly across the water. SpongeBob paused, listening as the music floated toward him, carrying with it a quiet melancholy and an odd sort of reassurance. It reminded him that not every lesson came with smiles or immediate understanding. Some were subtle, almost hidden, but no less profound. He hummed softly to himself, allowing the melody to blend with his own tune, weaving a quiet harmony that rippled outward in waves of gentle care. The further they moved, the more SpongeBob recognized that the night itself had become a teacher. Each obstacle, each small delight, each tender encounter carried a lesson not in urgency or grand gestures, but in noticing, in being present, in allowing oneself to move gently through the world. He began to understand that the journey itself mattered more than the destination, that the quiet attentions and soft gestures accumulated like a slow tide building towards something meaningful and lasting. By the time they arrived near SpongeBob's pineapple, the moon had reached its zenith, casting pale silver light over the familiar landscape. He paused outside his home, inhaling the warm, fragrant air and listening to the soft ripple of currents brushing against coral. Patrick floated beside him, a calm presence in the gentle night. SpongeBob smiled, realizing that he had learned something tonight, that life's subtle wonders could be experienced fully only by those willing to move with care, patience, and openness. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, mattered. Every attentive gesture left a mark, even if unseen. Every step through the world carried a ripple that stretched farther than he could imagine. SpongeBob finally stepped inside, setting the memory of the night gently behind him, like a soft quilt folded carefully in the chest of his mind. He looked around his pineapple, familiar yet somehow more alive after the quiet lessons of the evening. The kitchen smelled faintly of Krabby Patties, the windows glowed softly, and the gentle sway of his furniture seemed to echo the rhythm of the currents outside. He realized that the night's journey had been more than delivery, more than duty. It had been a meditation, a quiet adventure, and a lesson in the simple, powerful magic of attentiveness, patience, and care. As he lay down that night, listening to the gentle hum of the ocean and the distant lull of Patrick's hum, SpongeBob let his mind drift over the evening's events. Every bubble, every glimmer of light, every soft sound had left a trace in his heart. And for the first time, he understood that growing up was not about rushing through the days, not about achieving fame or recognition, but about carrying attention, empathy, and gentle courage with every step, and allowing these small acts to ripple quietly, invisibly, into the lives of others. And somewhere in that soft, infinite night, the jellyfish glowed like tiny lanterns, the currents whispered their approval, and SpongeBob drifted into sleep, wrapped in the warmth of the lessons, the soft care of friendship, and the quiet certainty that even the smallest acts mattered profoundly. Morning arrived slowly, spilling pale golden light across the rippling sands and the soft coral streets of Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob awoke to the warmth filtering through his pineapple windows, carrying the faint scent of the ocean and a hint of Krabby Patty grease lingering from yesterday's work. The world felt as though it had exhaled overnight, and in that quiet moment, he felt the lingering echo of last night's lessons: patience, attentiveness, and the subtle joy of being fully present. It was a calm awakening, one that did not rush him into the day, but allowed him to stretch into it gently, like a flower turning toward the sun. Patrick was already nearby, lying on a soft patch of sand just outside SpongeBob's home, humming the same simple melody he often did. SpongeBob smiled and stepped carefully across the sand, not wanting to disturb the delicate bubble of quiet that surrounded them. "Good morning," he said softly, and Patrick returned the greeting with a lazy wave, his eyes half closed, a subtle grin resting across his face. There was no urgency, no expectation, only the gentle rhythm of friendship, quiet and enduring, as if the night had taught them both something about how to move through the world with softness and care. As SpongeBob prepared for the day, putting on his square little uniform with care, he thought again of the pizza delivery. It had been a small adventure, yet the emotions it stirred in him remained vivid. He realized that even ordinary tasks could carry extraordinary lessons if approached with attention and empathy. The Krusty Krab, usually bustling with noise and energy, seemed almost serene that morning, and he moved through the kitchen with the awareness that every simple action, flipping patties, arranging buns, humming a soft tune, could ripple outward, touching someone else's day in ways he might never see. Mr. Krabs appeared, bustling in with a hint of impatience softened by the calm morning. "SpongeBob, me boy, you look ready for anything," he said, clapping a claw on his shoulder. SpongeBob smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of approval that had always followed the older Krab's rough-edged encouragement. Mr. Krabs was not a man of long speeches, but his presence carried reassurance, a quiet reminder that small achievements mattered, and that dedication, no matter how unnoticed by the larger world, was never wasted. SpongeBob nodded, feeling the weight of that lesson settle into his chest. Squidward lingered nearby, leaning lazily against the counter, his usual frown softened by the morning light. SpongeBob noticed the faint tremor in Squidward's antennae, the small signs of vulnerability he so often overlooked. He remembered the night's clarinet melody, the subtle hints that even a scowl could hide depth and yearning. Moving gently, he placed a tray of patties on the counter, careful not to disturb Squidward's space, and offered a quiet, "Good morning." Squidward's response was a barely perceptible nod, but it was enough. SpongeBob understood. Recognition could be soft, and kindness could take the gentlest forms and still carry weight. The morning passed slowly, each moment blending into the next like a soft current guiding them forward. SpongeBob busied himself with small preparations for the day's work, but his thoughts wandered often to the night before, to the jellyfish, the currents, the small fish he had helped, and the quiet magic of being fully present. Patrick hummed beside him as they worked, occasionally offering a soft observation or a chuckle, and SpongeBob realized how the simplest forms of companionship could carry profound, emotional resonance. It was in these moments that he understood the depth of quiet connection, the kind that did not demand attention or applause, but existed as a steady heartbeat beneath the chaos of life. Later, a small delivery arrived for the Krusty Krab, a batch of fresh ingredients for the kitchen. SpongeBob took the parcels carefully, humming a soft tune as he arranged them on the shelves. The ritual of handling them, the weight, the texture, the subtle scent of the sea still clinging to the vegetables, felt meditative. Each movement reminded him that care could be given in the smallest details, that attentiveness itself was a quiet kind of heroism. Even Squidward, watching from a distance, seemed to sense the serene rhythm in SpongeBob's motions, and the usual tension between them softened. Like waves easing across a quiet sandbank, SpongeBob's thoughts wandered to the friends he had yet to see that day, to Patrick, whose presence was a constant source of comfort, and to Squidward, whose subtle needs and emotions were often hidden, but no less real. He began to understand that emotional growth was not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about noticing, listening, and acting with gentle intention. The ocean itself seemed to mirror this lesson, currents shifting softly, light refracting in delicate patterns across the sand, each ripple a reminder that even the smallest movement could carry profound meaning. By mid-morning, SpongeBob had finished his tasks, but he lingered in the quiet of the kitchen, feeling the soft hum of the Krusty Krab around him. Mr. Krabs counted coins and shuffled orders with a distracted energy, while Squidward played a low, hesitant tune on his clarinet, more to himself than anyone else. SpongeBob hummed along faintly, allowing the melodies to mingle in a soft harmony, feeling that strange but comforting sense that the world, for all its quirks and imperfections, had a rhythm he could follow, and that following it with care brought its own kind of satisfaction. Patrick flopped beside him again, stretching lazily and humming. "Do you think the world notices all the small things we do?" he asked. SpongeBob thought for a moment, watching the gentle sway of the jellyfish through the kitchen window, the sunlight dancing across their delicate forms. "I think it does in its own quiet way," he replied. "Even if no one says anything, even if nothing changes in a big way, every little act leaves a ripple, and ripples always reach somewhere." Patrick hummed thoughtfully, and SpongeBob realized that this understanding, the recognition of subtle influence and quiet presence, was becoming part of him, shaping him in ways he could feel but not yet fully name. As the day wore on, SpongeBob found himself reflecting not just on the pizza delivery, but on the patterns that connected all his experiences. The kindness of the currents, the small gestures toward friends, the awareness of Squidward's hidden depths, the simple joy of Patrick's companionship. Each element formed a tapestry of quiet growth, a soft narrative that shaped his understanding of the world and his place within it. It was a reminder that life's most profound moments were often invisible, experienced only in the heart and remembered in quiet reflection. By evening, as the light softened and the ocean glowed with the first hints of twilight, SpongeBob felt a gentle exhaustion, the kind that comes not from strain but from fullness. He had moved through the day with attention, with care and with awareness of the subtle patterns that wove life together. He knew that tomorrow would bring more tasks, more small acts, more lessons. Yet there was comfort in knowing that he carried the night's understanding with him, that the soft magic of presence, attentiveness, and gentle care would guide him through all that was to come. And so, as he settled into his pineapple home for the evening, the faint hum of the currents outside, and the soft warmth of Patrick's presence nearby, SpongeBob allowed himself to drift into a quiet contemplation. The day had been ordinary, yet extraordinary in its subtleties. He had learned that growth was measured not in achievements or applause, but in the gentle, persistent practice of noticing, of giving care, and of moving through life with both patience and love. Somewhere in the soft expanse of water, the currents whispered, the jellyfish glimmered faintly, and SpongeBob, smiling softly, felt the calm satisfaction of a day lived fully in awareness and gentle intention, ready to carry that quiet strength into the next adventure the sea might offer. The next morning unfolded quietly, like a whisper, threading through the stillness of Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob awoke to the faint glow of sunlight, filtering through the rippling water outside his pineapple windows, golden streaks scattering across the floor in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost knowing. He stretched, feeling the gentle pull of the currents on his square frame, and with it came a soft awareness. Life was moving, always moving, and yet he could find stillness within it if he simply allowed himself to notice. Patrick was already perched nearby, humming softly as he watched a drifting plankton bloom shimmer in the morning light. SpongeBob smiled at him, not speaking immediately, letting the quiet fill the space between them like a soft lullaby. There was a kind of comfort in these moments, in the slow emergence of day where words were optional and presence alone was enough. Patrick's hum was a reminder of constancy, of friendship that did not demand performance, that existed in gentle companionship rather than loud acknowledgement. SpongeBob breathed in, letting the melody settle into his chest, softening the edges of lingering fatigue from yesterday's delivery journey. The Krusty Krab awaited him, familiar and oddly sacred in its rhythm. Mr. Krabs was already bustling, counting coins with methodical attention, while Squidward moved through his tasks with the quiet resignation that had become characteristic of his mornings. SpongeBob moved alongside them, his steps deliberate but soft, carrying a new awareness of the quiet lessons the world had been offering him. Attentiveness, patience, and the subtle power of noticing the invisible threads that connected every moment. Each gesture, each motion became more than mere routine. They were part of a rhythm, a gentle choreography of care that flowed like water through the spaces between them. A small delivery order arrived that morning, a simple request that might have seemed mundane to anyone else. Yet SpongeBob felt the familiar tug of purpose settle over him. It was not the task itself that mattered, he realized, but the way he approached it, the gentle attention he could offer, the quiet acknowledgement of every detail, every ripple, every possibility for kindness. He wrapped the package carefully, his hands steady, humming a soft tune that seemed to infuse the air with calm. Even Squidward glanced up briefly, drawn perhaps unconsciously to the serenity of SpongeBob's movements. Though he would never admit it, Patrick flopped beside him again, tilting his head with a lazy curiosity. "Do you think they notice how much care you put into things, SpongeBob?" he asked, voice soft and airy. SpongeBob thought for a moment, watching a drifting jellyfish catch the morning light in a glimmering arc. "Maybe not," he said gently, "but that's not why we do it. The ripple is enough, even if no one sees the first circle. It reaches somewhere always." Patrick hummed, as if trying to carry the words into the currents themselves, letting them drift quietly through the water. As the day progressed, SpongeBob found himself reflecting more on Squidward than usual. There was something in the subtle tension of the older squid's posture, the faint flicker of vulnerability behind the habitual frown that caught his attention. He remembered last night's melodies, the delicate, fragile notes that had floated through the darkened streets, and he realized that Squidward, for all his complaints and apparent disinterest, carried his own quiet lessons. SpongeBob moved gently around him, offering small gestures that might pass unnoticed. A tray placed carefully on the counter, a faint smile, the quiet hum of acknowledgement, understanding that sometimes presence alone was enough to convey care. Later, SpongeBob found himself walking a familiar path through the coral streets, carrying another delivery order, though his mind drifted more than usual. The night's reflections had settled into him like a soft tide, teaching him that life was composed of countless small moments, each carrying potential for attention and kindness. He noticed the way the sunlight danced across drifting seaweed, how tiny schools of fish moved in synchrony, each small ripple a reminder that even the smallest participants in life played a part in the unfolding pattern. Each detail felt significant, not in a dramatic way, but in the gentle assurance that the world responded to observation, to care, to presence. A minor obstacle appeared, a drift of tangled seaweed blocking his path, and SpongeBob paused, carefully disentangling it with his soft, deliberate hands. A passing fish paused to watch, and SpongeBob offered a quiet nod, a gesture that seemed to ripple outward, infusing the moment with a subtle warmth. It was not recognition he sought nor praise, but the quiet understanding that attending to the world, even in seemingly small ways, was a form of conversation, a meditation, and a kind of gentle heroism. By midday, SpongeBob returned to the Krusty Krab, carrying not only the completed delivery, but a profound awareness of the quiet forces that shaped life. Each small act of attention, each kind gesture, each moment of presence was a brick in a soft architecture of growth. The restaurant hummed around him, familiar yet alive with subtle life, coins clinking, buns soft and warm, Squidward's clarinet faintly echoing through a hallway, all merging into a slow, deliberate rhythm that spoke of continuity and the gentle power of perseverance. Patrick lounged nearby, watching SpongeBob's careful movements, and for a moment SpongeBob allowed himself to pause, feeling the bond of quiet companionship. "I think you're starting to see it," Patrick said softly. SpongeBob smiled, feeling the subtle warmth of understanding. He was beginning to see the world not just as a place to act within, but as a living network of relationships, currents, and interactions, each moment carrying weight, each gesture rippling further than it might ever know. As evening approached, the sunlight softened into gentle gold, spilling through the water like the fading notes of a lullaby. SpongeBob stood by his window, looking out at the calm streets and the slow sway of the ocean beyond. He thought of the night's earlier adventures, of small acts of care and subtle lessons in attentiveness. He realized that growth was not linear, not measured in grand events or heroic feats, but in the quiet accumulation of understanding, empathy, and patient observation. Each day added a layer to him, like the soft sediment of the ocean floor, forming slowly, inevitably, shaping the contours of who he was becoming. In that soft, fading light, SpongeBob understood that his journey, the pizza deliveries, the attentive gestures, the quiet connections, was only beginning. The world would continue to offer him challenges, curiosities, and lessons, and he would meet them with the same gentle care, awareness, and soft determination he had cultivated so far. The ocean itself seemed to pulse in agreement, currents brushing against his home, jellyfish drifting lazily in the distance, and a faint echo of Patrick's hum threading through the water. And as SpongeBob settled into the quiet of the evening, the soft glow of his pineapple home enveloping him, he allowed himself a slow, deliberate exhale. The day had been ordinary, yet deeply rich in subtleties. He had witnessed, acted, reflected, and grown, understanding in the quietest, most profound way that life's greatest lessons were often invisible, experienced only through attentiveness, care, and presence. He closed his eyes, feeling the gentle rhythm of the ocean echo in his chest, carrying with it the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more ripples, more quiet joys, and more opportunities to shape the world through the softest, yet most enduring forms of attention and kindness. And somewhere in the soft embrace of the underwater night, SpongeBob felt the gentle certainty that growth, friendship, and subtle courage would always be present, waiting patiently for each new day, each new step, each quiet ripple of care. The morning light filtered slowly through SpongeBob's windows, soft and golden, carrying with it the faint aroma of the ocean and a subtle warmth that seemed to settle over the entire town. He stretched, feeling the gentle pull of the currents against his small frame, and allowed himself a moment to simply exist, to notice the way the water shimmered across the floor of his pineapple home. There was a quiet magic in the ordinary, a slow rhythm that required only attention to become extraordinary. SpongeBob had begun to understand that the world offered these moments like little gifts, visible only to those who truly looked. Patrick was nearby, half awake, humming a faint melody that intertwined with the soft sway of the water. SpongeBob smiled and nodded, greeting him not with words, but with the gentle warmth of presence. Sometimes he realized presence alone could convey care more fully than speech ever could. Patrick's lazy hum was a kind of reassurance, a reminder that the simplest forms of companionship were also the most enduring, and that growth, understanding, and connection did not always require grand declarations. They simply required attention, patience, and a willingness to notice the quiet rhythm of life. The Krusty Krab awaited him, humming softly with the undertone of ongoing work, coins clinking faintly, and the gentle scrape of pans against the counters. Mr. Krabs was bustling about, his movements efficient and purposeful, yet softened in the golden morning light. SpongeBob watched him for a moment, feeling the subtle pulse of devotion and care beneath every motion. There was a lesson in observing the older crab. Dedication often went unnoticed, but its presence shaped the world around it quietly, invisibly. SpongeBob carried this thought with him as he moved to prepare for the day's work. His own steps deliberate, gentle, attentive. Squidward lingered nearby, clarinet in hand, attempting a low tune that wavered softly through the morning air. SpongeBob listened without comment, simply absorbing the notes, feeling the quiet vulnerability behind them. He remembered the night when those same melodies had floated through the streets, carrying lessons he had yet to fully name. There was a subtle strength in Squidward's persistence, an enduring dedication that mirrored SpongeBob's own gentle attentiveness. And so he moved quietly, humming softly along with the faint notes, understanding without words that shared acknowledgement could hold profound resonance. As the morning carried forward, SpongeBob received a small delivery order. Something simple, yet it felt more significant today than ever before. He wrapped the package carefully, imagining the small joy it might bring to the recipient, and felt that familiar gentle tug of purpose settling into his chest. It was not the act of delivering that mattered so much as the care he infused into it, the awareness that every gesture, no matter how ordinary, carried the potential to ripple softly outward. Patrick watched beside him, nodding faintly, his hum echoing as if approving this quiet recognition of meaning. The streets were calm as SpongeBob set out, the sun catching the edges of the coral and illuminating the smallest details with a reverent glow. A school of fish passed nearby, glimmering in synchrony like tiny breathing lanterns. SpongeBob waved to them softly, not expecting acknowledgement, but understanding that even unnoticed gestures carried subtle power. He hummed as he walked, a soft tune that wove itself into the currents, shaping the flow of the morning with gentle attention. It was in these moments, moving deliberately through the ordinary, that he felt the quiet pulse of heroism, small, persistent, and invisible to anyone but those who cared enough to notice. Along the way, he spotted a small jellyfish struggling to navigate a patch of rough seaweed. SpongeBob knelt beside it, carefully untangling the creature while humming the familiar melody. Patrick floated beside him, offering encouragement in soft, wordless gestures, and together they guided the tiny creature back into the open current. The jellyfish drifted away, leaving behind a faint shimmer in the water, and SpongeBob felt a wave of quiet satisfaction. It was not an achievement celebrated by others, but it carried a deep, internal resonance, a reminder that attentiveness, patience, and small acts of kindness could shape the world in ways no one could always see. The journey continued, each step weaving together the lessons of the past nights and days. SpongeBob reflected on the patterns emerging in his own heart, the way he responded to Squidward's subtle needs, the quiet companionship of Patrick, the enduring guidance of Mr. Krab's presence. Each connection, each interaction, was a thread in a larger tapestry of emotional growth, and SpongeBob began to see how intricately woven the threads were. Life's true heroism, he realized, existed in this steady accumulation of gentle, attentive acts, not in applause or recognition, but in quiet consistency and enduring care. By mid-morning, he paused to rest beside a softly glowing patch of coral, letting the current brush lightly against his square frame. He thought about the night before, about the ripple effects of even the smallest gestures. There had been the little fish he helped, the jellyfish that had followed him briefly, and the quiet harmonies shared with Patrick and Squidward. Each moment, seemingly ordinary, had left a soft mark, a reminder that life's meaning often resided in subtle details, invisible to the hurried eye but indelibly felt in the heart. SpongeBob hummed softly, a melody threading through the water like a gentle ribbon of light. He realized that growth, both personal and emotional, was not measured by grand gestures or dramatic victories, but by the quiet attentiveness to the lives around him, by the persistence of small, deliberate acts of care. Patrick's presence beside him offered affirmation. Squidward's melodies offered depth, and the pulse of the currents carried a sense of rhythm and purpose. Together, they created a world that was alive, meaningful and deeply connected, if only one chose to notice. As the afternoon sun shifted, casting long, soft shadows across the streets, SpongeBob found himself nearing the end of the delivery path. The world seemed slower now, the currents gentler, and the patterns of life around him easier to see. He noticed a small shell, glimmering faintly in the sand, and picked it up, examining its delicate curves. He placed it carefully near a patch of coral, imagining that some creature might find it later and feel a small spark of delight. It was an ordinary act, yet it carried the same quiet resonance as all the others, a gentle reminder that attentiveness, care and awareness were themselves forms of quiet heroism. By the time he returned to the Krusty Krab, the light had softened into a warm amber, and the town seemed to breathe along with him. Mr. Krabs counted coins with deliberate focus, Squidward played faint, hesitant notes on his clarinet, and Patrick hummed softly nearby. SpongeBob paused for a moment, letting the rhythm of the day wash over him, the quiet satisfaction of small, meaningful actions filling his chest. He understood now that life's greatest lessons were not found in dramatic moments or heroic deeds, but in the slow, deliberate accumulation of attentive, caring gestures, each one a ripple spreading quietly through the world. And as the sun dipped lower, spilling a final glow across the water, SpongeBob allowed himself to exhale, letting the soft warmth of the day settle into his heart. The currents whispered approval, the jellyfish drifted lazily, and the world seemed to hum along with him in gentle acknowledgement. He understood more deeply than before that every act of care, every moment of presence, every quiet gesture of attention carried with it a soft and enduring power, the kind that shapes hearts, creates connections, and nurtures growth in ways unseen but profoundly felt. SpongeBob closed his eyes for a brief moment, listening to the rhythm of the currents, the faint hum of Patrick, the subtle notes of Squidward's clarinet. Tomorrow would bring more lessons, more opportunities for attention and care, but tonight he could rest, wrapped in the gentle certainty that even the smallest acts mattered. That quiet heroism lived in attentiveness, and that life, with all its soft currents and subtle interactions, was a tapestry worth noticing. The morning came quietly, filtered through the water in slow beams of soft gold, touching the coral streets and illuminating the gentle sway of the currents. SpongeBob awoke to the muted hum of the ocean, the faint scent of sea air drifting through the cracks of his pineapple windows. He stretched, feeling the familiar tug of the water against his frame, and allowed himself a moment to breathe in the serenity that hung over the town. There was a kind of sacred rhythm in these mornings, a soft pulse that invited him to move slowly, to notice the subtle patterns of life that often passed unseen. Patrick was already awake, floating lazily nearby, humming a tune that seemed to flow in time with the gentle currents. SpongeBob greeted him with a small smile and a nod, feeling the quiet reassurance of companionship in its simplest form. They didn't need words. Their shared presence carried a kind of understanding that transcended language. Patrick's calm hum blended with the movement of the water, and SpongeBob felt the familiar warmth of quiet continuity, the kind that had been stitched into his life through countless days of gentle attention and soft reflection. The Krusty Krab waited for him, a place both ordinary and extraordinary in its rhythm. Mr. Krabs moved among the coins and pans, his focus intense yet strangely comforting, while Squidward leaned against the counter, clarinet resting lightly in his hands. SpongeBob observed them both, noting the subtleties in their movements, the small signs of care and persistence woven into even their most routine tasks. Today he felt a deep sense of awareness settling over him, a realization that the small actions, the unnoticed efforts, and the quiet attention of each individual created a resonance far beyond the surface of ordinary life. SpongeBob prepared for the day, slipping into his uniform with deliberate care. His hands moved gently over the trays and utensils, arranging them not merely for efficiency, but with an attentiveness that transformed mundane preparation into a soft ritual. He hummed quietly as he worked, a melody threading through the kitchen and blending seamlessly with the muted clinks of pans and the low tones of Squidward's clarinet. Each motion was a small meditation, a practice of presence, a recognition that every detail held meaning when approached with awareness. Patrick floated closer, eyes half closed, and asked softly, "Do you think people ever notice all the small things you do, SpongeBob?" SpongeBob paused, looking out at the soft shimmer of sunlight across the water, watching the way the currents danced in patterns that seemed intentional. "Maybe not," he said, voice low and thoughtful. "But it doesn't matter if they notice. The world carries the ripple anyway. Even if no one sees the first circle, the impact is still there." Patrick nodded, humming again. And SpongeBob felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that care, attention, and gentle presence could shape the world in subtle but enduring ways. A delivery order arrived, simple yet perfect for reflection. SpongeBob took it carefully, considering not only the task itself, but the ripple it might create. The smile it might bring, the quiet relief of someone receiving it, the invisible echoes that spread further than he could see. He carried it down the familiar streets, moving slowly and deliberately, noticing the light catching on coral, the subtle movements of small fish, the drifting of a distant jellyfish. Every detail was a note in a larger, unseen melody, one that spoke of patience, attentiveness, and the soft power of quiet gestures. Along the way, SpongeBob paused to help a tiny crab struggling beneath a fragile shell that had been caught in a current. He lifted it gently, letting it right itself before continuing on his path, and Patrick hummed softly beside him, offering a presence that was steady, unspoken, and deeply affirming. These moments, though small, carried immense meaning for SpongeBob. He had begun to understand that heroism, patience, and care were rarely loud or dramatic. They were often invisible, experienced only in the subtle changes they brought to hearts, minds, and currents. As he continued, he noticed Squidward's clarinet notes drifting faintly in the distance. Soft and melancholic, yet oddly comforting, SpongeBob allowed the melody to weave into his thoughts, a reminder that growth and connection often existed in quiet tension, in subtle gestures that required attentiveness to fully perceive. He hummed along softly, the tune mingling with the currents, the jellyfish, the glimmering sand, and the gentle pulse of life around him. The world seemed to exhale in response, offering a sense of flow, rhythm, and reassurance that the smallest attentions were never wasted. By mid-morning, SpongeBob reached the destination of his delivery, a quiet little dwelling at the edge of a coral grove. He handed over the package with a careful smile, noticing the faint, almost imperceptible glow of gratitude in the recipient's eyes. It was not a grand acknowledgement, but it resonated deeply within him. He realized once again that significance was rarely about recognition. It was about the intentionality behind actions, the love and care carried quietly in one's heart, and the awareness that even invisible ripples reached somewhere, touched someone, and mattered in ways the world often never recorded. On the way back, SpongeBob found himself reflecting more deeply on the bonds that had shaped him. Patrick's steadfast, quiet presence, Squidward's hidden vulnerability and persistent artistry, Mr. Krabs's rough yet reassuring guidance. Each relationship, each moment of shared attention, had contributed to his understanding of care, empathy, and the soft courage of presence. Growth, he realized, was not about reaching dramatic milestones, but about the slow, deliberate accumulation of attentiveness, kindness, and quiet observation. The currents themselves seemed to affirm this, nudging him forward gently, carrying him along in an endless rhythm of reflection and learning. Returning to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob paused near the window, watching the soft patterns of sunlight ripple across the coral streets. The day had been ordinary in some ways, yet profoundly rich in the subtleties he had noticed, the small gestures he had offered, and the quiet bonds that had strengthened without ceremony or spectacle. He felt the familiar warmth of fulfillment, a gentle satisfaction that flowed quietly through his chest, settling like a soft current in the deepest reaches of his being. Patrick floated close once more, settling beside him with a faint, contented hum. SpongeBob leaned back slightly, allowing the soft rhythm of the day, the quiet resonance of friendship and the gentle wisdom of experience to wash over him. Life, he understood, was composed of countless small ripples, each carrying meaning beyond immediate perception. Every attentive gesture, every act of care, every moment of presence, though often invisible to the hurried eye, contributed to the ongoing flow of growth, connection, and subtle transformation. As evening approached, SpongeBob allowed himself to pause and reflect in the gentle amber light spilling across the Krusty Krab. The day's ordinary tasks now carried extraordinary resonance, shaped not by achievement or recognition, but by the quiet awareness and attentive care with which he had moved through each moment. The currents whispered softly, the jellyfish drifted in gentle arcs, and Patrick's hum wove through the space like a soft, persistent lullaby. SpongeBob understood that the true value of life lay in these gentle attentions, these small but deliberate acts, and the subtle, enduring impact they created in hearts and currents alike. As night settled, SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, carrying with him the calm satisfaction of a day lived in mindfulness and gentle purpose. He paused to watch the soft glow of bioluminescent plankton drifting in the distance, their tiny lights flickering like distant stars. He hummed softly, a lullaby for himself, Patrick, and the currents, acknowledging the subtle power of presence, care, and attentiveness that had shaped the day. And somewhere in the quiet expanse of the ocean, the ripples he had created moved onward, imperceptible yet real, a testament to the quiet heroism of simply noticing, caring, and being. The morning rose with a soft glow that seemed to linger just a moment longer than usual, as if the world itself were savoring the calm. SpongeBob awoke slowly, feeling the gentle pulse of the currents brush against the edges of his pineapple home. He stretched his square limbs, listening to the faint, distant hum of Patrick already awake and drifting lazily nearby. The day promised no urgent tasks, no pressing worries, yet it carried the quiet weight of possibility, the kind that existed only in attentiveness, in the willingness to notice subtle patterns and soft ripples in the world around him. Patrick hummed a faint tune, one that blended naturally with the swaying of the water, and SpongeBob felt a quiet warmth in simply observing. There was comfort in these ordinary beginnings, in shared silence and gentle companionship. Words were unnecessary. Presence alone conveyed enough care, enough understanding. SpongeBob let the calm fill his chest, allowing the quiet rhythm of the ocean to settle his thoughts and prepare him for whatever the day might offer. By mid-morning, SpongeBob had made his way to the Krusty Krab, carrying the faint residue of dreams and reflections in his movements. The restaurant, familiar yet alive with subtle energy, hummed around him, the gentle clinking of coins, the soft scrape of pans, and the occasional low note from Squidward's clarinet, which seemed more contemplative today. Mr. Krabs shuffled busily, but his presence felt less hurried than usual, almost attuned to the softer currents of the morning. SpongeBob moved alongside them, a quiet participant in the unspoken flow, noticing how small attentions and deliberate care shaped the rhythm of the world. A delivery order arrived, one that seemed ordinary at first, yet carried a faint challenge in the form of distance and complexity. SpongeBob wrapped it carefully, humming softly, letting his mind wander through the currents, imagining the subtle joys the package might bring. He had learned by now that these deliveries were more than transactions. They were opportunities to practice patience, attentiveness, and quiet heroism. Each step, each careful motion, carried significance beyond what could be immediately seen, and he embraced the task with the deliberate intention of leaving soft ripples of care behind him. Patrick flopped nearby, eyes half closed, humming a faint melody that seemed in sync with SpongeBob's own soft tune. "Do you ever wonder if all the little things we do really matter?" Patrick asked, voice drifting lazily through the water. SpongeBob paused, feeling the current brush lightly over his frame as if offering an answer. "For they do," he said softly, "even if we don't see it right away. Every kind gesture, every small attention, every gentle word carries a ripple. Sometimes it reaches farther than we imagine." Patrick hummed thoughtfully, and SpongeBob felt that familiar reassurance of quiet, shared understanding, a truth that needed no embellishment or acknowledgement. As he made his way through the coral streets, SpongeBob noticed details he might have overlooked in busier times. A tiny crab carefully arranging shells near its home, a school of fish drifting in perfect synchronization, a small jellyfish caught in a delicate swirl of seaweed. Each observation reminded him of the interconnectedness of all things, the way subtle actions could alter currents, affect moods, and shift patterns in ways unseen. He paused to help the jellyfish free itself, humming softly as he did so, and felt the gentle glow of satisfaction that came not from recognition, but from attentiveness and care. The journey continued, and SpongeBob reflected on the quiet bonds that had shaped his understanding of the world. Patrick's unwavering, soft companionship, Squidward's hesitant vulnerability, Mr. Krab's enduring guidance. Each relationship offered lessons in empathy, patience, and subtle courage. The world, he realized, was composed of countless small ripples, each shaped by the deliberate attention and care of its inhabitants. Even ordinary days, he understood, were extraordinary when approached with awareness and softness. Midday came with the faint shimmer of sunlight refracted through the gentle currents. SpongeBob paused near a coral arch, letting the water wash around him, observing the rhythm of the tiny inhabitants moving through their small world. He thought of the previous deliveries, the small acts of care that had passed almost unnoticed, and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. These quiet contributions, imperceptible to most, were shaping the fabric of life around him in subtle yet meaningful ways. He realized that heroism did not need to be loud or celebrated. It could exist entirely in the quiet practice of presence, kindness, and gentle attention. A soft ripple carried Squidward's clarinet notes to him, melancholy yet comforting, threading through the currents like a reminder of persistence in the face of quiet struggle. SpongeBob hummed along, letting the melodies and the movement of the water blend into a gentle harmony. He thought of the small ways he had begun to notice others, the subtle signs of Squidward's needs, Patrick's calm attentiveness, the persistent, guiding presence of Mr. Krabs, and understood that these quiet observations were shaping him, teaching him patience, empathy, and the soft power of care. By late afternoon, SpongeBob reached the final destination of his delivery, a small dwelling nestled within a swaying field of coral. He placed the package carefully, imagining the slight warmth of gratitude it might spark in its recipient. The acknowledgement was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it resonated deeply within him. This moment, he realized, carried significance not because of any external recognition, but because of the attentiveness, care, and gentle intention he had infused into it. Even unseen ripples, he knew, had weight, depth, and meaning. On the journey back, SpongeBob reflected quietly on the day so far. Each small act of attentiveness, every moment of presence, and every gesture of care had accumulated into a rhythm he could feel in his chest. The currents themselves seemed to pulse with acknowledgement, moving around him in soft arcs and gentle swirls. The quiet satisfaction of contributing to the world in subtle ways filled him with warmth, a gentle echo of heroism that required no applause and yet resonated profoundly in his heart. Returning to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob paused to watch the amber light filter through the water, casting soft shadows across the familiar streets. He realized once again that growth, understanding, and connection existed in the accumulation of these small, deliberate gestures. The day had been ordinary, yet it carried richness in the details, in the soft bonds reinforced through quiet attentiveness, and in the ripple effects of care that would continue long after the moments had passed. As evening descended, SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, feeling a gentle exhaustion, the kind born not of strain, but of full engagement with the subtleties of life. He paused to watch the soft glow of bioluminescent plankton flickering in the distance, their tiny lights casting gentle patterns across the sand. Patrick hummed nearby, drifting lazily, and the world seemed to exhale around them, settling into the calm rhythm of night. SpongeBob closed his eyes, letting the quiet satisfaction of the day fill him, and understood that the greatest gifts of life were not grand gestures or recognition, but the patient, deliberate accumulation of small acts of attentiveness, care, and quiet presence. And as he drifted into the gentle hush of evening, the currents brushing softly around his pineapple home, SpongeBob carried with him the calm knowledge that each ripple he created, each small act of kindness, and each quiet observation shaped the world in ways that were unseen, but profoundly felt. The melody of the day lingered softly in his mind, a gentle lullaby of awareness, presence, and enduring care, carrying him gently toward rest, and the promise of another day filled with soft ripples waiting to unfold. The morning arrived as if it had taken its time, drifting over the streets of Bikini Bottom like a faint, lingering sigh. SpongeBob awoke to the soft glimmer of sunlight filtering through the water, scattering gentle reflections across the floor of his pineapple home. He stretched slowly, feeling the pull of the currents, the quiet tug of the world awakening around him. There was a softness in this day that promised reflection, a gentle rhythm that invited him to move carefully, to notice, to feel the subtle threads connecting him to everything else. Patrick floated nearby, half awake, humming a familiar tune that seemed to blend seamlessly with the subtle currents. SpongeBob smiled at him, and for a moment they simply existed together in quiet companionship. It was not the type of connection that required words. Their presence was enough, a shared acknowledgement that even the smallest gestures of attention and care were meaningful. SpongeBob took a slow breath, letting the calm fill his chest, reminding himself that growth, understanding, and connection often unfolded in moments like this, quiet, unnoticed, yet profound. The Krusty Krab greeted him with its usual soft hum of life. Mr. Krabs moved methodically among the coins and pans, each clink and shuffle forming a rhythm as steady and reassuring as the tide. Squidward lingered nearby, clarinet in hand, offering faint melodies that twisted gently through the kitchen air, melancholy yet strangely comforting. SpongeBob watched the ebb and flow of their movements, noticing the subtle ways care and attention manifested, in the careful stacking of coins, in the tentative grace of a melody, in the gentle presence of those who moved through life without seeking recognition. A small delivery order arrived, modest yet enough to carry the weight of attention and intention. SpongeBob wrapped the package with deliberate care, humming a soft tune as he imagined the joy it might bring to its recipient. He had come to understand that the act itself, infused with care, mattered more than any acknowledgement. Each gesture, each small ripple of kindness, had the power to reach beyond what was immediately visible, leaving impressions that might remain unseen, but were no less profound. Patrick drifted closer, offering his calm presence as if to affirm the invisible significance of these acts. SpongeBob's path took him through the familiar streets, now quiet with the soft pull of the late morning currents. He noticed details he might have overlooked in the rush of earlier days: a tiny snail curling gently around a coral branch, a school of fish moving in synchronized patterns, the delicate sway of seaweed catching the sunlight. Every observation reminded him of the interconnectedness of life, of the subtle ways one act could ripple outward, touching hearts, shaping moods, and guiding currents. He paused to help a small fish disentangle itself from a patch of drifting seaweed, humming softly all the while, feeling the quiet satisfaction that came not from recognition, but from attentiveness and care. Along the way, SpongeBob reflected on the relationships that had shaped him: Patrick's unwavering companionship, Squidward's subtle vulnerability, Mr. Krabs' steady guidance. Each bond, he realized, offered lessons in empathy, patience, and soft courage. The world was a network of ripples, each shaped by the deliberate attention of its participants, and even the smallest gestures contributed to the greater flow of life. Heroism, he understood more clearly than ever, was not found in grand achievements, but in the persistent, gentle practice of presence, care, and attention. By midday, he arrived at the final destination of the delivery. A quiet dwelling nestled within a coral grove received him, and he handed over the package with deliberate gentleness. The recipient's smile was faint but genuine, almost imperceptible, yet it resonated deeply within SpongeBob. He realized that significance did not require celebration or recognition. It existed inherently in the care with which one approached every action. Even unseen ripples had weight, depth, and meaning, shaping the world quietly, persistently, and profoundly. On the journey back, SpongeBob allowed his mind to wander through the currents of memory. He thought of earlier deliveries, small acts of care that had passed unnoticed, and he understood how each one had subtly shaped him, teaching lessons of empathy, patience, and the enduring impact of attentiveness. Patrick's hum accompanied him, steady and soft, a gentle reminder that even the simplest companionship provided grounding and warmth. Squidward's distant clarinet notes drifted faintly through the water, melancholy yet affirming, a quiet testimony to persistence and subtle artistry. As afternoon light softened into a warm amber, SpongeBob paused near a coral arch, letting the water wash around him. He thought about the subtle threads connecting every moment, the gestures, the attentions, the small kindnesses, and he realized that life's true depth was rarely found in dramatic moments. Instead, it lived in the accumulation of gentle actions, in the quiet awareness that each movement, each thought, and each touch could ripple farther than the eye could see. The currents themselves seemed to pulse with approval, carrying him gently toward reflection and understanding. Returning to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob noticed the shifting light across the familiar streets. The day's quiet rhythm resonated in him, the subtle satisfaction of meaningful attention settling like a soft tide in his chest. He reflected on how each relationship, Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, had contributed to his understanding of connection, care, and presence. Even ordinary days, when approached with awareness and attentiveness, were extraordinary in the gentle transformations they encouraged, both in himself and in those around him. As evening approached, the amber glow deepened, softening edges and filling the world with a calm certainty. SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, feeling the gentle exhaustion of a day spent in mindful engagement. He paused to watch the faint bioluminescent glow of plankton drifting through the currents, their tiny lights reflecting like distant stars in the gentle hush of the ocean. Patrick hummed nearby, soft and steady, and SpongeBob allowed himself a slow, deliberate exhale. Each act of care, each attentive gesture, each moment of presence had accumulated into a rhythm that filled him with warmth, a quiet heroism that required no applause, but resonated deeply within. As the ocean settled into night, SpongeBob lay in his pineapple home, letting the soft rhythm of the currents lull him toward rest. He thought of the ripples he had left behind that day, the gentle, unseen marks of attention and care, and understood that they were part of a larger pattern, one that connected hearts, currents, and lives in ways impossible to measure. He hummed a soft tune for himself, for Patrick, and for the quiet world around him, acknowledging the enduring significance of presence, attentiveness, and subtle kindness. And as the night deepened, the ocean whispering softly outside, SpongeBob felt a profound sense of calm certainty. Life's quiet heroism lived in these gentle currents, in the accumulation of small acts, in the patient attentiveness to the world around him. Every ripple mattered, every gesture carried weight, and every moment of care contributed to a tapestry of connection, growth, and enduring presence. The morning light filtered through the water more softly than usual, as if the world were holding its breath for a moment of quiet reflection. SpongeBob stirred in his pineapple home, letting the gentle pulse of the ocean currents ease him awake. He stretched slowly, feeling the subtle tug of the water against his form, and breathed in the faint scent of salt and seaweed, a familiar aroma that carried comfort and rhythm. Today promised nothing dramatic, yet it held the same quiet possibility as every day, an opportunity to notice, to care, to move gently through the currents and leave soft ripples in their wake. Patrick floated nearby, humming a familiar, lazy tune that seemed to sync perfectly with the soft sway of the water. SpongeBob offered him a small smile, and they shared a silent acknowledgement, no words necessary, only the warmth of quiet companionship. It was in these ordinary, unspoken moments that SpongeBob felt the most profound sense of presence and belonging. Even the smallest gestures, he realized, could carry meaning when offered with attentiveness, patience, and care. He let himself linger there a moment, feeling the gentle pulse of life around him, before moving toward the Krusty Krab to begin the day. The restaurant welcomed him with its familiar sounds, coins clinking softly, the scrape of pans against counters, and the low hum of Squidward's clarinet, faint but persistent. Mr. Krabs moved among the counters and registers, focused yet strangely serene in the morning light. SpongeBob observed them both, absorbing the quiet lessons hidden in their routines, the dedication beneath Mr. Krabs' frugality, the vulnerability beneath Squidward's grumbling melodies. There was a subtle poetry in this, a reminder that attentiveness and care often manifested in ways too gentle or small to be noticed, but carried a weight all their own. A delivery order arrived, simple yet full of purpose. SpongeBob prepared it carefully, wrapping the contents with deliberate attention and humming a soft tune that drifted through the kitchen. He imagined the small joys the package might bring, the subtle ripple of warmth it might spark. and felt the quiet satisfaction of intentional action. Patrick floated nearby, offering his calm presence as reassurance, a gentle reminder that even the smallest companions could amplify the quiet power of care. SpongeBob realized again that significance was not in the grand gestures, but in the accumulation of thoughtful, attentive moments, each one leaving its mark unseen but deeply felt. He set off through the familiar streets, noticing the intricate details that often went unnoticed: the shimmer of sunlight on coral, a snail weaving slowly along its path, the precise movements of a school of fish gliding effortlessly through the water. Every small observation carried meaning, every delicate gesture a subtle echo of the day's quiet heroism. SpongeBob paused to help a tiny crab untangle itself from a patch of swaying seaweed, humming softly as he guided it free. There was no need for thanks. The act itself carried its own reward, a gentle reminder of the value of presence and attentiveness. As he continued, SpongeBob reflected on the threads of connection that had grown in his life over the years. Patrick's calm companionship, Squidward's hesitant vulnerability, Mr. Krabs' steadfast guidance. Each relationship offered subtle lessons in patience, empathy, and quiet courage. He understood more clearly than ever that life's true heroism existed not in drama or spectacle, but in the deliberate practice of care, in the small gestures that built connections and nurtured growth without fanfare. The currents themselves seemed to pulse with affirmation, carrying him gently along a path of reflection and understanding. By midday, SpongeBob reached the home of the package's recipient. He handed it over with careful deliberation, noticing the faint, almost imperceptible smile of acknowledgement. It was subtle, yet it resonated deeply within him. Recognition was not necessary. The true value lay in the intention, in the attention given, in the quiet energy he had infused into each action. Even unseen ripples had weight, shaping the currents, influencing the world in ways both immediate and enduring. SpongeBob understood that these soft currents of care were the real measure of meaningful presence. On the way back, he allowed his mind to drift, reflecting on the day's small, attentive actions. Each delivery, each moment of careful observation, each instance of presence and support had accumulated into a gentle rhythm he could feel in his chest. Patrick's hum accompanied him, steady and comforting, a quiet counterpoint to the flowing currents around them. Even the distant melancholy of Squidward's clarinet seemed to harmonize with the day's reflective pace, offering subtle lessons in persistence, artistry, and understated care. As afternoon light softened, SpongeBob paused near a gentle coral bend, letting the water wash over him, listening to the faint echoes of his own humming mingling with the currents. He thought about the patterns he had begun to notice, the interplay of kindness, attentiveness, and quiet heroism in his life and the lives around him. Growth, he realized, existed not in moments of dramatic action, but in the steady accumulation of deliberate, meaningful attention. Every ripple mattered, every gesture carried significance, and every small act of care shaped the world in ways that were invisible, yet profoundly felt. Returning to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob watched the amber glow of the late afternoon sunlight reflecting across the streets. The day, though ordinary in appearance, had been rich with subtle learning, attentiveness, and connection. Each relationship he nurtured, each act of quiet heroism, added to a broader, unseen tapestry of presence and care. Even small moments and a humming melody, a helping hand, a shared glance, were threads in this delicate, enduring weave. As evening settled over Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, letting the calm warmth of the day linger in his chest. He paused to watch the gentle flicker of bioluminescent plankton drifting through the currents, their faint glow echoing the quiet significance of the day's actions. Patrick floated nearby, humming softly, and SpongeBob allowed himself to breathe in the satisfaction of having moved through the day with awareness, attentiveness, and care. Each ripple he had left behind, though unseen, was real, shaping currents, hearts, and moments in subtle, lasting ways. And as night deepened, the ocean around him whispered softly, wrapping the world in a calm embrace. SpongeBob lay in his pineapple home, letting the gentle rhythm of the currents carry him toward rest. He hummed a soft lullaby for himself, for Patrick, and for the quiet world surrounding them, acknowledging the enduring power of presence, attentiveness, and subtle kindness. Each small act mattered, each gesture left ripples, and life's quiet heroism persisted in the steady, deliberate practice of care. The day began with a soft sigh, the sunlight filtering through the water in gentle, golden threads that moved like whispers across the coral streets. SpongeBob stirred in his pineapple home, letting the currents brush gently against him as he stretched and breathed in the familiar calm of the morning. There was a quiet rhythm in the world today, slower and more deliberate than usual, as if the ocean itself were inviting him to notice, to reflect, and to move through life with gentle attentiveness. Patrick floated nearby, humming a low, lazy tune that merged seamlessly with the currents. SpongeBob offered a small smile, and for a moment they existed together in comfortable silence. Words were unnecessary. Presence alone was enough, an acknowledgement that even the smallest gestures of companionship carried meaning. SpongeBob took a slow breath, letting the calm fill him, feeling the quiet warmth of continuity in friendship and shared experience. It was in these moments, ordinary yet profound, that he understood the subtle heroism of living attentively, of caring and of noticing. By mid-morning, he made his way to the Krusty Krab, where the familiar sounds greeted him, the soft clinking of coins, the low scrape of pans against counters, and the persistent, slightly melancholic notes of Squidward's clarinet. Mr. Krabs moved among his coins and trays, his focus both deliberate and comforting, a reminder of steady guidance in a world that often seemed too fast for its own good. SpongeBob observed the rhythms of the place, appreciating how the ordinary tasks of the day, when performed with care and attention, held their own subtle beauty. A new delivery arrived, modest yet filled with possibility. SpongeBob wrapped it carefully, humming softly as he imagined the small joys it might bring. Each package, each delivery, was more than a task. It was a tiny ripple of kindness, a chance to affect the world gently but meaningfully. Patrick floated close, offering his quiet, steady presence, a reminder that even small companions could amplify the subtle impacts of attentiveness and care. SpongeBob thought about how significance often went unnoticed, yet it persisted, shaping the currents and the world in quiet, enduring ways. As he moved through the coral streets, he noticed details he might have overlooked on busier days. A school of tiny fish weaving patterns around a sunken shell, a snail pausing to rest on a coral branch, the slow sway of seaweed reflecting the sunlight. Every observation reminded him of life's delicate interconnections, the subtle ways one act could ripple outward, touching hearts and influencing patterns far beyond immediate perception. He paused to help a tiny crab free itself from a tangling patch of seaweed, humming softly as he guided it. The act brought no applause, no recognition, only a quiet satisfaction that deepened the rhythm of his day. SpongeBob reflected on the relationships that had shaped him, Patrick's unwavering companionship, Squidward's hidden vulnerability, Mr. Krabs' guiding presence. Each offered lessons in empathy, patience, and subtle courage. He recognized that heroism existed not in dramatic actions, but in the persistent practice of care and presence. The world responded to these soft attentions, carrying them onward in unseen currents, threading them into the lives of others and back into his own. By late morning, he arrived at the home of the delivery recipient. The package was handed over with deliberate gentleness. A faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on the recipient's face, a quiet acknowledgement of care. SpongeBob realized once more that significance did not require celebration or overt recognition. It existed in the intention behind each action, in the attentiveness and thoughtfulness infused into each gesture. Even the unseen ripples carried weight, shaping life quietly, persistently, and profoundly. On his return, SpongeBob allowed his mind to drift, reflecting on the small acts that had punctuated the day. Each delivery, each attentiveness, each moment of gentle care contributed to a larger unseen rhythm, a flow that shaped hearts and currents alike. Patrick's hum accompanied him, steady and grounding, while Squidward's clarinet notes, drifting faintly from a distance, reminded him of perseverance, artistry, and the subtle beauty found in persistence. As afternoon light softened, SpongeBob paused near a gentle coral bend, letting the currents wash softly around him. He considered the threads of life, the interplay of kindness, attentiveness, and quiet heroism that wove the fabric of existence. Growth, he understood, was found in the steady accumulation of deliberate attention, in the quiet moments of noticing and caring that left traces on the world beyond what could be immediately seen. Each ripple mattered, each gesture carried significance, and each act of presence shaped the currents of life in ways subtle yet profound. Returning to the Krusty Krab, he noticed the amber glow of late afternoon sunlight reflecting across familiar streets. The day's rhythm, ordinary yet rich in attentiveness, resonated in him. Every relationship nurtured, every gentle act of heroism, contributed to a broader, unseen tapestry of care and presence. Even the smallest moments, a shared glance, a humming tune, a helping hand, and were threads in this enduring weave, soft but indelible in the quiet memory of the world. As evening settled over Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, feeling a gentle exhaustion, one born not of strain but of a day spent fully present. He paused to watch the faint glow of bioluminescent plankton drifting through the water, their tiny lights flickering like distant stars in the quiet hush of the ocean. Patrick hummed nearby, floating lazily, and SpongeBob allowed himself a slow, deliberate exhale, savoring the gentle heroism of living attentively. As night deepened, the ocean whispered softly, wrapping him and the world around him in calm reassurance. SpongeBob lay quietly in his pineapple home, letting the currents carry him toward rest. He hummed a soft lullaby, a melody for himself, for Patrick, and for the subtle world surrounding them. Every ripple, every small act of care, every attentive gesture carried enduring weight. Life's quiet heroism persisted in the deliberate, mindful practice of presence, patience, and attentiveness, shaping currents and hearts alike in ways seen and unseen. And as the moonlight shimmered across the ocean floor, SpongeBob felt a profound sense of calm certainty. The day's soft ripples, though invisible to many, were real, shaping the flow of life with quiet, enduring power. He allowed himself to drift fully into the lull of the night, his thoughts and heart resting in the knowledge that attentiveness, care, and gentle presence were the truest forms of heroism. The morning arrived quietly like a slow exhale across the water. SpongeBob awoke with the currents gently nudging his pineapple home, soft light spilling through the windows in tender beams. There was a stillness today, a subtle invitation to linger in awareness, to notice the quiet rhythms that often went unnoticed in the rush of ordinary life. Patrick floated nearby, humming a faint, meandering tune, and SpongeBob smiled at him, feeling the gentle warmth of their shared companionship. It was the kind of presence that required no words, an acknowledgement that even the smallest gestures of care and attention carried deep significance. The day at the Krusty Krab began with familiar motions, yet there was a new attentiveness in SpongeBob's steps. Mr. Krabs shuffled among his coins and trays, his movements precise but somehow softer than usual, as if the world's quiet currents had taught him patience in the stillness of the morning. Squidward's clarinet offered gentle melodies, drifting faintly through the air, carrying a subtle, melancholic comfort. SpongeBob moved alongside them, noticing the minor details, the way sunlight danced across polished counters, the soft rhythm of coins touching each other, the gentle sway of utensils, and felt a quiet joy in the ordinary poetry of life. A delivery order came in, small and seemingly routine, yet SpongeBob approached it with deliberate care. Wrapping the package slowly, he hummed softly, imagining the recipient opening it and feeling a faint warmth that his attention had sparked. Patrick floated beside him, humming along quietly, a steady presence that reminded SpongeBob how subtle companionship amplified even the smallest acts of kindness. He thought about how significance was often invisible, yet it persisted, carried in the gentle ripples of intentionality, attention and care. As he moved through the streets, SpongeBob noticed subtle details he might have overlooked before. A snail slowly curling around a coral branch, the synchronized movements of tiny fish weaving between rocks, sunlight refracted in delicate patterns across the sand. He paused to help a small crab untangle itself from a patch of drifting seaweed, humming softly as he guided it free. The act required no acknowledgement, no thanks, only the quiet, internal satisfaction of having touched another life gently, leaving a subtle ripple in the currents that would carry forward in ways unseen but real. Thoughts drifted naturally to the bonds that shaped him, Patrick's calm and unwavering presence, Squidward's vulnerability hidden beneath layers of distance, Mr. Krabs's steadfast guidance. Each connection offered lessons in patience, empathy, and quiet courage. SpongeBob realized that heroism existed not in grand gestures, but in persistence, attentiveness, and the steady practice of care. The world responded to these soft attentions, threading them into the fabric of life, shaping currents and hearts alike in subtle, enduring ways. By late morning, SpongeBob reached the recipient's home. He handed over the package with deliberate gentleness, noticing the faint acknowledgement in their eyes, a smile barely perceptible, yet profoundly felt. He understood once more that the significance of his actions lay not in outward recognition, but in the attention and care he had invested. Even unseen ripples had weight, shaping patterns and influencing life quietly yet persistently. Each small act of kindness, each thoughtful gesture, contributed to a subtle, enduring form of heroism that flowed through the world with gentle power. On the journey back, SpongeBob allowed his mind to drift. He reflected on the quiet achievements of the day, the attentive actions, the mindful gestures, the small moments of care that had accumulated into a soft, harmonious rhythm. Patrick's hum accompanied him, steady and comforting, a reminder that presence alone was powerful, capable of amplifying even the smallest acts. Squidward's faint clarinet notes floated in the distance, melancholy yet soothing, a reminder that persistence and quiet artistry mattered even when unnoticed. The afternoon light softened into amber, casting gentle shadows across the streets. SpongeBob paused near a coral arch, letting the currents wash over him, carrying his thoughts like leaves along a stream. He considered the interconnectedness of every act, the attention he offered, the kindness he shared, the presence he maintained. Growth, he realized, existed not in dramatic upheavals, but in small, steady gestures that accumulated into lasting patterns. Each ripple mattered, each careful movement carried significance, and each act of attentiveness shaped the currents of life in ways subtle yet profound. Returning to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob noticed the soft glow of late afternoon sunlight, reflecting on familiar surfaces. The day's rhythm, ordinary yet rich with awareness, resonated deeply in him. Every relationship nurtured, every small act of attentiveness contributed to a broader, unseen tapestry of care. Even the simplest moments, a shared glance, a hum, a helping hand, were threads in this intricate weave, quietly shaping the flow of life around him. As evening descended, SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, letting the calm settle in his chest. The glow of bioluminescent plankton flickered softly outside, mirroring the quiet satisfaction of a day lived attentively. Patrick hummed nearby, floating lazily, and SpongeBob allowed himself a deep, deliberate exhale. He understood that the greatest heroism lay not in spectacle, but in gentle, persistent attentiveness, in the ripples created by deliberate care and quiet presence. The night deepened, and the ocean whispered softly, wrapping the world in calm reassurance. SpongeBob lay in his pineapple home, letting the gentle currents lull him toward rest. He hummed a soft lullaby for himself, for Patrick, and for the subtle world around them, acknowledging the enduring significance of presence, attentiveness, and quiet kindness. Every ripple mattered, every gesture carried weight, and the quiet heroism of life persisted in these small, deliberate acts of care. As the moonlight shimmered through the water, casting faint patterns across the sandy floor, SpongeBob felt a profound sense of calm. The day's subtle ripples, though invisible to most, were real, shaping hearts and currents alike. He allowed himself to drift fully into the lull of night, resting in the knowledge that life's quiet heroism persisted in the patient, mindful practice of care, attentiveness, and presence. And somewhere softly the currents seemed to whisper back to him, affirming that even small gestures could leave a lasting, beautiful mark on the world. The morning light arrived softly, scattering delicate golden threads across the coral streets, and SpongeBob woke with a calm awareness. Feeling the gentle pulse of the currents moving through his home, he stretched slowly, savoring the familiar rhythm of the water around him, and let his thoughts drift, unhurried, like tiny leaves carried along by the ocean. Patrick floated nearby, humming a soft tune that blended with the currents, and SpongeBob smiled at him, appreciating the quiet presence that needed no words, no explanation. Here, in the calm intimacy of shared silence, the weight of life felt lighter, the ordinary imbued with subtle, enduring significance. The day at the Krusty Krab began quietly, Mr. Krabs moved among his coins and trays, careful and deliberate, while Squidward's clarinet offered its faint, melancholy melody, filling the room with a soft, almost hypnotic rhythm. SpongeBob observed them both, noticing the beauty in the ordinary. The shine of a polished counter, the soft scrape of a pan across the grill, the tiny, almost imperceptible inflections in Squidward's playing that revealed a hidden depth beneath his grumbling exterior. In these moments, SpongeBob understood that heroism did not always announce itself with grandeur or spectacle. Sometimes it lived quietly in attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate practice of care. A small delivery order arrived, the kind that seemed routine but carried the promise of connection. SpongeBob wrapped it with careful attention, humming softly as he imagined the recipient opening it, feeling a subtle warmth emanating from the thought. Patrick floated beside him, humming along quietly, a gentle affirmation that presence alone could amplify meaning, even in the smallest acts. SpongeBob considered how significance often went unnoticed, yet persisted, carried in soft currents that touched hearts and shifted patterns in ways unseen but deeply felt. As he floated through the familiar streets, SpongeBob observed the subtleties he had grown to notice, the way sunlight refracted through a ripple of water, the slow curl of a snail around a coral branch, the synchronized glide of a school of tiny fish. Each observation was a reminder of life's intricate interconnections, the delicate ways one act or thought could ripple outward to influence others in ways invisible yet enduring. He paused to help a small crab untangle itself from drifting seaweed, humming gently as he guided it free. The act required no recognition, no thanks, only the quiet, inward satisfaction of having left a subtle, meaningful imprint. As the day progressed, SpongeBob reflected on the threads of connection that had shaped him over time. Patrick's steadfast companionship, Squidward's hidden vulnerability, Mr. Krab's unwavering guidance. Each relationship offered lessons in patience, empathy, and the quiet courage that comes from persistence and attentiveness. He understood more clearly than ever that heroism was not measured by grand achievements, but by small, consistent acts of presence and care. The world responded to these soft attentions, carrying them forward in currents both visible and unseen, weaving them into a tapestry of subtle significance. By midday, he reached the recipient's home. Handing over the package with deliberate gentleness, SpongeBob noticed the faint acknowledgement in their eyes, a delicate smile, a subtle nod, enough to carry meaning without ceremony. Recognition, he realized again, was not necessary for an act to hold value. The attention and care invested in each gesture were sufficient. Even unseen ripples carried weight, shaping currents and influencing the subtle flow of life, in ways both immediate and enduring. Each small act of attentiveness, each mindful gesture, contributed to a quiet heroism that persisted quietly, resiliently and without need for acknowledgement. On the way back, SpongeBob let his thoughts wander. He considered the small victories of the day, the attentive moments, the mindful gestures, the quiet acts of care that, when accumulated, formed a soft, enduring rhythm. Patrick's hum accompanied him, steady and grounding, while Squidward's faint clarinet notes, drifting in from the distance, reminded him of the hidden beauty in persistence, subtlety, and patient artistry. The day felt like a gentle weave of meaning, each thread of care threading itself into the fabric of his life and the lives around him. As the afternoon waned, SpongeBob paused near a gently swaying coral bend, letting the currents move around him as he reflected on the subtle interconnections of existence. Every gesture, every attentive act, every mindful observation contributed to a pattern of life that was invisible yet profoundly real. Growth, he realized, existed not in sudden epiphanies but in steady, attentive presence. Each ripple mattered, each act of care shaped the currents of life, and each small moment of attentiveness created a resonance that stretched beyond immediate perception. Returning to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob observed the amber glow of late afternoon light reflecting across familiar surfaces. The day's ordinary rhythm, enriched by attention and care, resonated deeply within him. Every relationship nurtured, every soft gesture, and every mindful action contributed to a greater unseen tapestry of quiet significance. Even the simplest moments, a shared glance, a humming tune, a helping hand became threads in this enduring weave, soft yet indelible in their subtle influence. As evening settled over Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, carrying the calm warmth of the day with him. The bioluminescent plankton drifted past, flickering faintly like distant stars in the hushed waters, a quiet echo of the ripples he had left behind. Patrick hummed nearby, floating lazily, and SpongeBob allowed himself a slow, deliberate exhale, savoring the gentle heroism of living attentively and mindfully. Every ripple mattered, every small gesture carried meaning, and life's quiet heroism persisted in the deliberate, patient practice of care. Night deepened, the ocean surrounding him whispering softly, a lullaby for the world. SpongeBob lay in his pineapple home, letting the gentle currents carry him toward rest, humming softly for himself, for Patrick, and for the quiet world around them. Every ripple, every subtle act of kindness, every attentive gesture resonated quietly, carrying enduring weight. Life's quiet heroism persisted in these small, deliberate acts threading currents, hearts, and moments together in a subtle, beautiful harmony. And as the moonlight shimmered faintly across the ocean floor, SpongeBob felt a profound calm settle within him. The day's quiet ripples, though invisible to most, were real and enduring, shaping hearts and currents in ways both subtle and profound. He drifted fully into the embrace of night, resting in the understanding that attentiveness, care, and presence were the truest forms of heroism. Somewhere in the currents, softly, the world whispered back, affirming that even small, gentle actions could leave lasting, beautiful traces. The early morning light arrived softly, spilling delicate threads across the water that moved like whispers along the coral streets. SpongeBob stirred in his pineapple home, feeling the gentle current wrap around him, carrying with it the faint hum of a day yet to unfold. Patrick floated nearby, still half asleep, his gentle breathing and quiet hum blending seamlessly with the rhythm of the ocean. SpongeBob smiled softly at him, allowing himself a slow, deliberate stretch, a mindful acknowledgement of the quiet continuity that had always been present in his life. Today felt different, though not in urgency or spectacle. It carried a reflective stillness, a subtle invitation to look backward as he moved forward, to notice the currents he had shaped and the ripples that had returned to him. By mid-morning, he made his way to the Krusty Krab. The restaurant was calm, bathed in the gentle glow of filtered sunlight that shimmered across the counters and trays. Mr. Krabs moved with careful attention, more deliberate than usual, counting coins and observing the rhythm of the day. Squidward's clarinet floated softly through the space, the melancholy note stretched just long enough to echo the subtle beauty of the morning. SpongeBob absorbed it all, noticing the quiet patterns, the tilt of a coin, the faint glint of light on the grill, the almost imperceptible pause in Squidward's music that seemed to mark a heartbeat. Each of these ordinary movements, he realized, was imbued with a kind of understated poetry, a reminder that presence and attentiveness were forms of heroism in themselves. A small delivery order arrived, yet SpongeBob approached it with the same careful intention he had shown countless times before. Wrapping it, he hummed softly, imagining the recipient opening it and feeling a quiet warmth in their heart. Patrick floated beside him, humming in harmony, and SpongeBob thought again of how even small companions could amplify the resonance of care. He understood deeply now that significance was not measured by grand gestures, but by the deliberate, persistent attention one offered to the world, to others, and even to oneself. The streets of Bikini Bottom carried the day's gentle rhythm. SpongeBob noticed the subtle details he had come to cherish: sunlight dancing in ripples along the sandy floor, a snail pausing atop a coral branch, a school of tiny fish weaving intricate patterns. He paused to help a small crab untangle itself from a stray piece of seaweed, guiding it carefully as he hummed a soft tune. The act required no recognition, yet it left a quiet imprint in the currents, a reminder that every small gesture mattered. Every attentive act rippled outward, in ways unseen but real. SpongeBob reflected on the tapestry of relationships that had guided him through these quiet, extraordinary days. Patrick's steadfast companionship, Squidward's hidden vulnerability, Mr. Krabs' enduring guidance, each bond carried lessons in patience, empathy, and the subtle courage of attentiveness. He realized that heroism existed not in grand achievements, but in the persistence of mindful, deliberate presence. The currents themselves seemed to affirm this understanding, carrying his thoughts forward, threading them into the world in ways both gentle and enduring. Arriving at the delivery destination, SpongeBob handed over the package with quiet care, noticing the subtle acknowledgement in the recipient's expression, a faint smile, a gentle nod enough to carry meaning without ceremony. Recognition, he understood again, was never necessary for an act to hold value. The weight of attention, the care invested in each gesture was sufficient. Even unseen ripples carried significance, shaping the flow of life in subtle, lasting ways. Each action, no matter how small, added to a broader pattern of quiet heroism, a pattern that threaded through hearts, currents, and the invisible fabric of the world. On the way back, SpongeBob allowed his mind to wander through the mosaic of moments that had marked his life. The attentive gestures, the mindful acts of care, the subtle heroism he had practiced, each contributed to a rhythm both soft and enduring. Patrick's hum was a constant undercurrent, grounding him, while Squidward's distant clarinet reminded him that beauty often lived in persistence, subtlety, and quiet artistry. The day felt like a delicate weave, each thread of kindness and attention forming a tapestry of presence that stretched outward beyond perception. As afternoon faded, SpongeBob paused near a gentle bend in the coral, letting the water flow around him, carrying him in quiet reflection. He thought of the interwoven patterns of life, how each attentive act, each subtle gesture, contributed to currents that shaped the world in ways both visible and unseen. Growth, he realized, was found in consistency, in the accumulation of soft attentions, in the deliberate act of noticing. Each ripple mattered, each gesture left an imprint, and each moment of care carried quiet power, threading itself into the rhythm of life. Returning to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob noticed the late afternoon glow reflecting off familiar surfaces, soft and golden. The ordinary rhythm of the day, made extraordinary through attentiveness and care, resonated in him. Every relationship nurtured, every small gesture of kindness, every mindful action contributed to a larger, unseen tapestry of quiet significance. Even the simplest of moments, a glance, a hum, a helping hand, were threads in this intricate weave, subtle yet enduring in their effect. As evening descended, SpongeBob returned to his pineapple home, letting the calm warmth of the day settle within him. The bioluminescent plankton drifted past, flickering faintly like distant stars, mirroring the soft ripples he had left behind. Patrick hummed nearby, floating lazily, and SpongeBob exhaled fully, savoring the quiet heroism of living attentively. Every ripple mattered, every gesture carried meaning, and life's enduring beauty persisted in deliberate acts of presence and care. Night deepened, wrapping the ocean in a soft, reassuring hush. SpongeBob lay in his pineapple home, letting the gentle currents carry him toward rest. He hummed a soft lullaby, not only for himself but for Patrick, for the world around them, for the unseen ripples that connected all things. Every act of care, every attentive gesture, every mindful moment carried weight, threading currents, hearts and lives into a quiet, enduring harmony. And as the moonlight shimmered across the ocean floor, SpongeBob felt a profound calm settle within him. The ripples he had left in the world, subtle yet persistent, were real and enduring, shaping the currents and hearts in ways invisible but profoundly felt. He allowed himself to drift fully into the night, resting in the knowledge that attentiveness, care, and presence were the truest forms of heroism. Somewhere softly the world whispered back to him, affirming that even the smallest acts could leave lasting, beautiful traces. And with that, he stretched into the stars. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man.